Every man will face suffering. It is not a question of if, but when. It arrives without warning, without permission, and without mercy. One day, the foundation of your life feels steady, and the next, it cracks beneath your feet. You lose the job you thought was secure. The person you loved walks away. A dream you invested years into collapses overnight. And suddenly, you are face to face with a truth that most men spend their entire lives trying to avoid. Suffering is unavoidable. But while suffering touches every man, not every man responds to it the same way. Some collapse under its weight, never to rise again. Some become bitter, hollow shells of who they once were. But a rare few those who history remembers choose differently. They do not see suffering as punishment, nor as an accident. They see it as fuel. They understand that pain, when processed correctly, can be converted into power. This is the mental architecture of the strong. This is the design of men who do not merely survive suffering, but weaponize it. Think of Viktor Frankl, a man imprisoned. In Nazi concentration camps, stripped of everything, his freedom, his family, his dignity. Most would have given up hope. Yet Frankl discovered a principle that would outlive the camps and echo for generations. He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. In the midst of unimaginable suffering, he reframed his pain as fuel for meaning. That decision not only kept him alive, but gave him a strength greater than his captors could ever touch. His suffering became his architecture of power. Or consider Nelson Mandela, who endured 27 years in prison. Every day was an opportunity to let bitterness consume him, to let suffering rot his spirit. But Mandela chose a different frame. He treated prison as a university. He studied his enemies, strengthened his vision, refined his will. When he walked out, he was not a broken man. He was a forged one, untouchable by hate, magnetic in authority. His suffering became the furnace that melted away weakness and left only steel. Here lies the secret. Suffering is not the end of your story. It is the raw material of greatness. What fire is to gold, what pressure is to diamonds, suffering is to men. It burns, it crushes, it tests, but it also refines, shapes, and strengthens. And the difference between the broken and the legendary lies not in whether they suffer, but in whether they use it. Most men ask, "Why me?" when pain arrives. Legends ask, "What will this make of me?" Ordinary men pray for suffering to pass quickly. Extraordinary men lean into it, knowing that every moment in the fire is a moment of transformation. Think of Thomas Edison. Thousands of failed experiments could have convinced him that suffering was proof of inadequacy. Instead, he reframed every failure as a lesson. "I have not failed," he said. "I have simply found 10,000 ways that will not work." His suffering was not wasted. It became the data that lit the world. Andrew Carnegie, too, began in suffering, poor, overworked, without privilege. But instead of letting that hardship define him, he used it as hunger, as fuel, as proof that he would not remain where he started. His suffering became the energy that built an empire of steel. This is the mental architecture of power. The ability to look at suffering and say, "This is fuel. This is my forge. This is my training." It is a structure built inside the mind, brick by brick, thought by thought, until no storm can collapse it. But here is the truth. Most men never build this architecture. They let suffering scatter them into chaos. They complain. They retreat. They see pain only as cruelty. And because they never learn to reframe it, they never rise above it. You cannot avoid suffering. You can only decide how to use it. You can let it consume you, or you can let it construct you. You can treat it as the thief of your destiny, or as the very architect of it. The men who built civilizations, who left legacies, who commanded respect beyond their lifetimes, all shared this trait. They turned suffering into fuel. They did not waste it. They converted it. They alchemized it into energy, discipline, resilience, wisdom. They understood that comfort never creates power. Only suffering does that. So the question is not, will you suffer? It is, what will you do when suffering comes? Will you let it hollow you out, or will you build from it a fortress that no enemy can touch? You are closer to power than you realize. You are not 10 victories away. You are not 10 opportunities away. You are one reframe away. One decision to treat suffering, not as an enemy, but as an ally. That shift will unlock a strength you never knew you had. That shift will place in your hands a fuel source that never runs out. Because as long as you live, pain will come, and if you choose, so will the power that pain can produce. This is where the architecture begins. One thought at a time. One decision at a time. One moment of choosing fuel instead of failure. Build this mindset, and suffering will no longer terrify you. It will empower you. Suffering is the test every man must take, but few pass. It is not a single moment. It is the daily grind, the slow weight that presses on the soul, the fatigue that whispers, quit. And this is where the transformation begins. The ordinary man sees suffering as random punishment. The extraordinary man sees it as intentional training. The mental architecture of power is built not in the absence of pain, but in the way you arrange it, use it, and rise because of it. To turn suffering into fuel, you must first decide that nothing you experience will be wasted. Every rejection, every failure, every heartbreak must be recycled. Do not throw it away with complaints. Do not bury it under distractions. Collect it, study it, channel it. Because suffering carries energy, and energy, when directed, becomes momentum. The difference between the weak and the legendary is that the weak waste the energy of their suffering, while the legendary convert it into drive. Think of the blacksmith's forge. The fire burns either way. If the blacksmith is careless, the fire destroys. If he is wise, the same fire shapes steel into weapons that conquer. Your suffering is the same. The fire will burn. The only question is whether you will let it consume you or allow it to craft you. Consider the discipline of athletes. The pain of training is immense. Muscles tear, lungs burn, bodies ache. But athletes do not interpret this pain as destruction. They interpret it as construction. The suffering is fuel. Each repetition builds. Each drop of sweat invests. Each moment of fatigue deposits into the account of future victory. What others call punishment, they call progress. This is the shift of perspective that makes suffering powerful. Now imagine, if you took this same principle into your daily life. Every insult you receive fuel to strengthen your confidence. Every rejection fuel to sharpen your skills. Every loss fuel to clarify your mission. Suffering then stops being an obstacle and becomes an ally. It stops being chaos and becomes architecture. But this requires habit. One decision is not enough. You must train yourself to respond this way until it becomes automatic. And that is where discipline enters. Discipline is the mechanism that turns suffering into fuel consistently. Without discipline, suffering overwhelms. With discipline, suffering obeys. Look at Nelson Mandela once more. Prison was 27 years of daily suffering. Every morning, he could have woken bitter, resentful, hopeless. But he chose discipline. He studied, he read, he wrote, he strategized. He imposed structure on chaos. The suffering did not stop, but he used discipline to convert it. When he emerged, he was not only unbroken, he was prepared. His suffering had become the architecture of his authority. Or look at Abraham Lincoln. Loss after loss haunted him: political defeats, business failures, personal tragedy. Each could have been an excuse to quit. But Lincoln's habit was endurance. He disciplined himself not to surrender to despair. And through repetition, this endurance became his identity. When the Civil War threatened to destroy the nation, he was already forged in suffering. He could stand because he had practiced standing. For decades, the mental architecture of power is built on this principle. Suffering plus discipline equals fuel. Pain alone can crush you. Discipline alone can exhaust you. But pain directed through discipline becomes unstoppable. It becomes momentum, resilience, magnetism. You must begin with small disciplines. Rise early, even when your body begs to stay in bed. Train your body, even when it aches. Focus your mind, even when distractions tempt you. Practice silence even when you want recognition. These small acts are daily rehearsals of suffering, and each one strengthens the muscle that will allow you to endure greater trials. When they come, do not wait for life to test you. Test yourself daily. Fast when food is plenty, so hunger cannot break you. Train when you are tired, so fatigue cannot defeat you. Work when you feel uninspired, so lack of motivation cannot control you. Each act of voluntary suffering builds reserves of strength. And when involuntary suffering arrives, you will already be prepared. The world respects this kind of man. He becomes untouchable, not because he avoids pain, but because he commands it. Others run from fire, he walks through it. Others collapse under weight, he carries it and grows stronger. Others curse suffering, he thanks it. And because he thanks it, he transforms it. Thomas Edison understood this when he said, "Opportunity is missed by most people because it is dressed in overalls and looks like work." In truth, opportunity is often dressed in suffering. It comes disguised as rejection, as long hours, as sacrifice. Most men miss it because they despise the form it takes. But those who embrace it, those who use discipline to endure it, find that suffering was never punishment. It was the preparation for power. And here is the most important truth. Suffering is constant fuel. Unlike motivation, it does not run out. Life guarantees you pain, use it. Every insult, every setback, every trial is free energy. Most waste it through anger, self-pity, or despair. Legends capture it, contain it, convert it. So the architecture is clear. Build discipline daily, even in small ways. Reframed suffering as fuel, not punishment. Direct pain into growth, not destruction. Repeat until it becomes identity. When this system is built in your mind, suffering cannot defeat you. It becomes your ally. And when suffering becomes your ally, you are no longer ordinary. You are becoming powerful beyond measure. This is the beginning of the architecture of power. And it begins not with avoiding pain, but with using it. There is something almost mystical about the way suffering, when carried with discipline, turns into magnetism. Men who endure and rise through hardship develop a weight, a presence, a gravity that cannot be faked. People sense it the moment such a man walks into a room. He doesn't need to announce his strength. It radiates from him. He doesn't need to demand respect. Respect is drawn to him naturally. And here lies a law that few understand. Suffering, when reframed and mastered, creates silent authority. Think about the men you admire, the ones whose names echo through history. They did not become legendary because life was kind to them. They became legendary because life was brutal. And yet, they refused to be broken. Their scars became their credentials. Their endurance became their magnet. Their suffering became the architecture that carried their influence. Consider again the life of Nelson Mandela. The man who entered prison was already determined, but the man who left was unshakable. 27 years of suffering had given him a moral weight that even his enemies could not deny. When he spoke, people listened not because of charisma alone, but because his suffering had been converted into silent authority. The world trusted him because he had paid the price in pain. His suffering was not a weakness. It was the very foundation of his power. The same pattern appears in Abraham Lincoln, a man marked by loss and defeat, who carried depression like a shadow. Yet instead of allowing suffering to hollow him, he let it carve depth into his soul. That depth made his words heavy with meaning. When Lincoln spoke of unity, sacrifice, and perseverance, people felt it because they knew he had lived it. His suffering made him magnetic. His pain gave him credibility that no speech alone could ever produce. And here is the principle. Suffering creates authenticity. People trust the man who has bled. They follow the man who has endured. They listen to the man who has scars, because scars are proof. Proof that you have walked through the fire and survived. Proof that your strength is not theory, but reality. Proof that your discipline is not pretend, but practiced. This is why suffering, when converted into fuel, does more than strengthen you privately. It shapes how the world perceives you. It builds the aura of a man who cannot be shaken. And that aura is magnetism. But magnetism is not built by announcing your pain. It is built by enduring it in silence. The man who constantly broadcasts his suffering is seeking sympathy, not strength. The man who endures quietly, who disciplines himself to continue moving forward without begging for attention, creates a mystery around himself. Others sense his power, but cannot fully explain it. That mystery draws people in. That restraint makes him untouchable. Look at Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, yet a man who carried immense personal suffering, wars, betrayals, sickness, loss. And yet he did not cry out for the world's pity. Instead, he turned his pain inward into reflections that became the meditations. Wisdom so profound that it still guides men centuries later. His silence, his restraint, his refusal to waste. Suffering through complaint, this is what made his authority timeless. Think too of modern examples. Men who endure suffering in business, in sport, in art, often do not speak of it until after the victory is won. They do not use pain as a tool for attention. They use it as a furnace for discipline. And when they emerge victorious, their authority is doubled because people see the results and then discover the suffering that forged them. Suffering kept silent until it produces fruit is the most powerful kind. So how do you practice this principle? First, by refraining from complaint. The moment you complain, you waste your pain. Complaint turns suffering into bitterness. Silence turns suffering into gravity. Second, by maintaining forward motion. Do not stop building, training, working, simply because life hurts. Movement in the midst of pain is proof of strength. Third, by practicing reflection. Write, think, meditate, convert your experiences into wisdom. Pain without reflection is wasted. Pain with reflection is alchemy. And here is the paradox. The more suffering you endure with discipline, the more people are drawn to you, even if they cannot explain why. They sense the weight of your endurance. They feel the strength of your silence. They are attracted to your scars, not because of the wounds themselves, but because of what the wounds made of you. This is what I call the architecture of magnetism. Pain creates depth. Depth creates weight. Weight creates gravity. And gravity draws everything into its orbit. That is why men who suffer with discipline rise into positions of influence without chasing it. They are not out there begging for attention, trying to prove themselves, shouting for recognition. They are building silently, and the world comes to them. But beware, not all suffering produces power. Only reframed suffering, only disciplined suffering, only suffering that is endured and transformed becomes magnetism. Suffering that is wasted through bitterness, self-pity, or complaint creates the opposite. Weakness, repulsion, fragility. The choice is yours. And so I say to you, do not waste your suffering. Guard it. Convert it. Let it build you silently. Do not rush to announce it. Let it carve depth into your soul. Let it shape resilience into your spirit. Let it build an aura around you that others can feel but not explain. Because when you do, you will find that suffering is giving you something more valuable than comfort ever could. Authority that no one can take, magnetism that no one can copy, power that no storm can shake not. This is the silent formula of magnetism. Suffer, endure, transform, and remain quiet until the results speak for themselves. Then, and only then, will the world realize that your suffering was never your weakness. It was the very architecture of your power. Suffering is not just a storm to survive. It is raw material waiting to be shaped into architecture. The mistake most men make is treating suffering as random, meaningless, chaotic. But the few who rise above the rest see it differently. Suffering can be structured, disciplined, directed. It can become the foundation of an unshakable life if you are willing to treat it like fuel. This requires deliberate practice, a step-by-step process of discipline that turns pain into power. The first step is acceptance. Most men waste years denying their suffering. They drown it in distractions. They numb it with pleasure. They pretend it isn't real. But denial is the enemy of transformation. You cannot use what you refuse to face. The man who hides from suffering becomes weaker by the day, because while he hides, the pain still works on him in secret. But the man who accepts his suffering, who looks it in the eye and says, "Yes, this is mine, and I will use it," that man begins to build. Acceptance is the first brick in the architecture of power. The second step is reframing. Pain is neutral until you label it. To one man, rejection means I am worthless. To another, rejection means I must sharpen my approach. To one man, failure means I am done. To another, failure means I am closer. The event is the same. The interpretation decides everything. If you want to transform suffering into fuel, you must discipline your mind to reframe. Every loss is a lesson. Every betrayal is a test. Every hardship is preparation. By reframing pain, you redirect its energy. You turn fire that would have burned you into fire that forges you. The third step is structure. Chaos consumes the undisciplined. When suffering comes, ordinary men collapse into disorganization, sleepless nights, erratic habits, broken routines. But legends impose order on chaos. They set a schedule, even in storms. They create rituals to anchor themselves when everything around them is shaking. Think of soldiers at war. They eat at certain hours, train at certain hours, march at certain hours. Why? Because discipline creates stability, and stability transforms fear into focus. If you want to use suffering as fuel, you must structure your life around it. Wake early. Train daily. Reflect nightly. Keep rituals even when you don't feel like it. Especially when you don't feel like it. The fourth step is voluntary discomfort. If you only face suffering when life forces it on you, you will always be unprepared. But if you rehearse suffering, you will be ready. This is why legends deliberately choose discomfort. They fast to train hunger. They wake early to train fatigue. They endure silence to train patience. These rehearsals harden will. They teach you that pain is not fatal, that discomfort is not destruction. And when real suffering comes, you will not panic. You will already know how to carry it. The fifth step is reflection. Suffering without reflection is wasted because it teaches nothing. Legends journal, meditate, pray, or write not to escape suffering, but to capture its lessons. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations in the midst of war and loss. His reflections turned private suffering into wisdom that has endured for centuries. Do the same. Do not let pain pass without extracting its meaning. Reflection is the process that turns raw suffering into refined strength. The sixth step is integration. Discipline means taking the lessons of suffering and weaving them into your identity. If rejection has taught you resilience, integrate it by continuing to stand tall. If loss has taught you gratitude, integrate it by cherishing what remains. If failure has taught you persistence, integrate it by refusing to stop. Integration is what prevents suffering from being just a story of the past. It becomes part of your architecture, a living strength you carry forward. The seventh step is service. This is the highest use of suffering. Once you have endured, reframed, structured, and integrated your pain, you have something rare, wisdom. Use it to serve others. Share it not for sympathy, but for strength. The man who turns his suffering into fuel not only rises himself, but becomes a beacon to others still in the fire. This is why legends attract followers, not because they sought attention, but because their scars became proof that power is possible. Look again at the lives of those we admire. Nelson Mandela endured prison and then integrated its lessons into leadership. Abraham Lincoln endured repeated failure and integrated it into resilience that led a nation. Viktor Frankl endured unimaginable cruelty and integrated it into a philosophy that healed countless lives. They did not waste their suffering. They structured it, reflected on it, and integrated it into power. That is why they are untouchable. Most men collapse under suffering because they resist the process. They deny, complain, scatter, and waste. Their pain. But if you choose discipline, you can rise. You can take every trial and stack it like a brick, building step by step the architecture of a life no storm can destroy. Remember, power is not born from ease. It is constructed from suffering. Comfort makes men fragile. Struggle makes them strong. Every hardship is an invitation to build. Every scar is a blueprint for discipline. Every tear is a seed of strength. But only if you use them. So begin now. Accept your suffering. Reframe it. Structure your days around discipline. Practice voluntary discomfort. Reflect until you find meaning. Integrate the lessons into your identity. And finally, serve others with the wisdom you have earned. Do this consistently, and you will discover that the suffering you once feared has become the very foundation of your greatness. This is how men turn suffering into fuel. This is how they build the architecture of power. Not in dreams, not in fantasies, but in the daily discipline of transforming pain into progress. Asterisk suffering will visit every man. It will test you when you least expect it, when you are tired, when you are weak, when you are certain you cannot endure another blow. And in that moment, everything will be revealed. Your habits, your discipline, your mindset, all of it will rise to the surface. You cannot fake strength when suffering knocks on your door. You are either built or you are broken. But here is the truth that few dare to believe. Suffering is not here to destroy you. It is here to build you. Every heartbreak, every loss, every rejection, every failure is an invitation to rise. The pain is not the end. The pain is the process. And if you dare to embrace it, to structure it, to reflect on it, to integrate it, you will find that the very thing you thought would bury you has instead planted you. The soil of suffering, when cultivated, grows the roots of unshakable power. History has proven this. Lincoln, Mandela, Franklin, Edison, Carnegie, all men scarred by struggle, yet all men who refused to waste it. Their suffering was not their prison. It was their training ground. And because they endured, they became untouchable. Their names echo across generations, because their pain was not meaningless, it was transformed. And so, I ask you now, what will you do with your suffering? Will you curse it? Will you waste it in complaint? Will you allow it to hollow you out, leaving nothing but bitterness? Or will you choose the path of the few, the path of those who rise? Will you take your suffering and turn it into discipline? Will you take your scars and turn them into strength? Will you take your pain and turn it into power? You are closer than you think. You are not miles away. You are not decades away. You are one decision away, the decision to stop running from suffering and start using it. That decision will change everything. Because once you learn to turn suffering into fuel, life can no longer touch you the same way. Trials become training. Loss becomes lesson. Failure becomes feedback. Every attack becomes energy for your rise. You become untouchable. This is the mental architecture of power. Accept suffering. Reframe it. Discipline yourself through it. Reflect on it. Integrate it and serve others with the wisdom it gives you. Build this structure, and no storm can collapse you. You will stand when others fall. You will rise when others quit. You will endure when others break. And the world will not be able to ignore you, because your very presence will carry the weight of one who has suffered and risen. So decide now. Stop wasting your pain. Stop hiding from your suffering. Use it. Build with it. Become through it. Let it fuel you until no enemy, no setback, no rejection, no loss can stop your ascent. Turn your suffering into fuel, and you will become a man who cannot be broken. And if this message has struck something inside you, if it has reminded you that your pain is not wasted, that your struggle is not meaningless, then take action. Like this video so the message spreads to others who are still lost in the fire. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because every day we bring you wisdom in the spirit of Napoleon Hill wisdom that rewires your thinking, rebuilds your discipline, and reshapes your destiny. Share this message with another man who is suffering now, someone who needs to hear that his pain is not the end, but the beginning of his transformation, because the world does not need more men who hide from suffering. It needs more men who harness it. It needs more men who build themselves into living proof that pain can be converted into power. And you are one of those men. If you choose to be. So rise, build, endure, let your suffering fuel you, and become unstoppable.